Welcome to BeerNet Radio. Listen to on every continent except Antarctica. BeerNet.
Beer.
BeerNet Radio.
If I owned a golf simulator bar, I would make sure that everyone's
Sorry.
was at least 5 miles an hour higher.
What are you watching there, Harry?
10 miles an hour higher, because that's going to be obvious.
I was listening to a podcast and now I can't find I can't find the tab to turn it off.
On virtual golf outposts?
Way more. Yeah, that's shitty. It's like
No.
Top golf?
No.
Says golf simulator.
Where does it say that?
I thought that's what I heard.
Oh no, it was just a podcast. Those jokers over at Wash Media, I swear they crack me up. You'd like them, Jordan. They're in their early 30s, just having children.
Oh, perfect.
You should check it out. It's called Circling Back.
Circling back. All right, I'll check it out.
Yeah, they're the old guys that they were the content providers at Total Frat Move in Austin. And then they grew out of it because they're not.
You can only do that for so long.
Yeah, you can only do that. You can only get away with that until you're in your mid to late 20s, and then it really starts to take a bad look. So then they graduated to Post-Grad Problems, which I really enjoyed. And then that website went out of business, and so they started their own podcasting called Washed Media. Circling back. Yeah, it's pretty good. 3 guys, and they're a little older than you, but they're good guys. Well, we have a knock at the door. So Jordan, this person that we have as a guest on the pod today, back in the day, we used to do the top 50 most powerful people in the beer industry, and it was the U.S. beer industry, and we called it the BeerNet Power, or just top 20, the BeerNet Power 20, and Craig Purser was a regular number 1 on the BeerNet Power 20. We quit doing the list a few years ago.
I've seen the old articles.
Yeah, it's kind of out of fashion to do power lists these days. But I guarantee if we did do a power list, Craig Purser would be in the top 5, maybe number 1. Hello, Craig. Welcome to BeerNet Radio.
Man, with friends like that, I'm telling you what. Now, I happen to know a lot of people that knew how to use email. That's all I'm going to say about that.
Well, can you, Jordan? Can you hear him very well?
You're a little faint, Craig.
Okay, you want me to? Is that any better? You want me to try?
What do you think of this new studio, Craig, that I crafted together? We're getting to be kind of big time. He can't hear me. He's going to have his headphones, but Jordan, yeah, the studio is coming together. I ordered more wood siding.
Looks sweet, man. I want to come check it out.
Yeah, come by and check it out. I have to kind of put the camera in tight because the wood
only goes so far.
Yeah, it only goes so far, and I didn't order enough. So when I order more, I won't look like I'm just. You don't put baby in a corner, Jordan. I learned that from the great late Patrick Swayze. All right, Craig.
Can you hear me better?
Not really, but that's all right.
Better?
We'll make it work.
We'll make it work. So obviously this is Craig Purser of the National Beer Wholesalers Association. Thanks for being on, Craig. We have a lot to cover. A lot coming off. Well, I mean, look at the news today. Monster and Constellation, the second trial balloon coming up. What's weird about it to me is that, coming from the beer side, I'm like, oh, Constellation is thinking about buying Monster, but really the analysts are saying it's the other way around, that Monster trades at a higher multiple than Constellation does. So that would make it more expensive to go the other way. But anyway, that's neither here nor there. The point is that we're seeing a blurring of the lines. And what does that mean, Craig, for you and your members?
Well, first of all, thanks for having me, Harry. It's great to be back. I feel like we're going OG. The Super Bowl was a look back, and maybe a conversation between us on BeerNet Radio feels like a little bit of a look back. But yeah, I mean, it's a big deal, and it's an interesting deal. There's a lot of things to unpack. I think the analysts have done a good job of talking through all the different scenarios. But as it relates to what does this mean to distributors, it means that what NBWA does has never been more important. I mean, one of the things that we're reminded of from maybe the most recent round of combinations, which really began in 2008, with two things that happened. One was the combination of Miller and Coors, and the other, of course, was the acquisition of Anheuser-Busch. Both of those kind of woke up the industry in a very different way. We know that the value of state laws are really important as it relates to protecting the values of these businesses. And so consequently, the whole notion of, anytime suppliers combine, if a state does not have a successor supplier provision that prohibits terminations without cause, that's something that we pay attention to. And, obviously 2008 was interesting because it woke everybody up as there was an attempt to terminate some 44 distributors in mass. And then, of course, we had some deals in the early 2010s with the acquisition of Modelo by AB globally and Constellation. And then, of course, the acquisition of SAB Miller by ABI. And the first provision that was included in as a condition for that merger was the one that we had first sought, which was to limit or prohibit terminations without cause as a result of this deal. And all the parties, including SAB, Miller, Legacy, Miller Coors, Molson Coors, agreed to that. That was the only provision that came out of the Department of Justice conditions that was applied both to Anheuser-Busch InBev and to Miller Coors, now Molson Coors.
And how is that held up? Because, we obviously have seen Constellation, maybe not as part of the deal, but in California specifically, make some kind of de facto terminations.
Without a doubt. And Constellation's done it. Other brewers have done it likewise, where there's not a specific beer franchise laws. Those manufacturers have made choices to terminate long-standing, highly performing partners. And, we've spoken about it. It has served, I think, as a real-time wake-up call to the rest of the industry, to a number of states that have laws in place or have passed stronger laws to prohibit terminations without cause. And so all of those things kind of get a different look and a different workout when we start talking about additional global combinations. I mean, I do think that one of the things that's interesting about this potential Constellation monster tie-up is that, it's the great convergence that you've talked about for so long in a different way, in as much as it's non-alcohol and alcohol. We know about the Canarchy deal that's been announced, which is interesting. We also know about the Coke ownership of Monster, which is interesting. But all of this, I think, gets a fresher look when we look at this. And we also look at last week's competition executive order report that came out, kind of long awaited, where at least the government, both at the DOJ and the FTC, have promised more rigorous review of M&A activity.
And that presumably includes the middle tier.
Yes, without a doubt. There was a lot of attention paid in the report to the middle tier, which I'm sure we'll get to. But as it relates to the manufacturer, the supplier level, the combination of an alcohol beverage company and a traditional non-alc beverage company, calls into question a whole host of issues. It goes into how does the Federal Alcohol Administration Act get applied? It goes into who owns the distribution. It goes into a whole host of many and varied state laws. But all of that gets additional attention, because of this kind of combination. I mean, when you think about Monster more specifically, their influence in the convenience channel is significant. They are able to buy shelf space, both at the C-store, where I think they probably have their best representation off premise, and they can buy business in the on-prem. I mean, you buy the business in the on-premise. Very, very different from that of alcohol beverage. So,
and also hard to enforce, Craig. I mean, the TTV's like, yeah, if there's proof that there's a quid pro quo from non-alc to alc, but if there's no written proof, it's very, very hard. But how do you reconcile going back to that administration report that they're saying on the one hand there's just a lot of consolidation in the producer and the middle tier in particular, but then also there's been a great proliferation of craft breweries underneath that. And so how do they reconcile that those are mutually exclusive?
Well, it really is interesting. I mean, the way that we kind of our initial blush on the report was we characterized it as incomplete or inaccurate. And I think inaccurate and incomplete and inconclusive are really the three I's that I would describe this with. For instance, it does not talk about the fact that when it comes to beer, manufacturers don't have to have a federal basic permit. That was something that was included in our comments when the order was issued. And that's not the be all end all. It's just worth noting because that's part of what was incomplete. That was not addressed. That was not talked about. The report has been widely panned, I think, from a variety of sources. The Beer Institute, offered a little bit more commentary around it. Part of the focus included kind of a big criticism of marketplace concentration at the manufacturer level, and certainly that is an issue that I think everybody's concerned about. But there were some facts that weren't accurate as it relates to how they examined that. In their opening conversation around distribution, some facts that weren't included in their opening conversation and cite to the number of craft brewers. Big inaccuracy in the report compared to the numbers that TTB keeps. And so there was a lot of things that were there. We saw the American beverage licensees criticize it. So you've got Beer Institute on one end, the independent retailers on the other. We've also seen the Wine and Spirits Wholesalers of America had some concerns about it. And I just read a publication that's a leading kind of a antitrust newsletter here in Washington, D.C. called Capitol Forum. And they don't have a lot of, they promise a longer look at it, but they ask a whole host of questions about it likewise. So like I said, it's an interesting read. That's not to say that there aren't some positive things in it. Some positive things, I think, for distributors and kind of balancing the force. It does recognize the value of three-tier. It does talk about concerns related to vertical integration. That's important, particularly when we're talking about a federal government report. It also is pretty clear about something that's been debated by legal folks around deference to the 21st Amendment and state alcohol regulation. That is, I think, a big takeaway that's pretty clear, that's also in this report. And then finally, I also do think that it recognizes the value of the Federal Alcohol Administration Act and the tied house provisions. And that's especially important as we watch these potential tie-ups between beverage companies and beer companies or alcohol companies. And as we look at global food and beverage companies like Pepsi-Cola, for instance, attempt to enter the alcohol beverage marketplace as a, wait for it, distributor.
Right. And let's segue that. But before we get off of that, there was some mention of franchise law in the report.
This is not an alcohol press.
Okay. I just want to be clear. Yes. Because it is only 2:15 in the afternoon. But from a practical perspective, when they start talking about distribution and franchise law in particular, with the federal government, what can they do except maybe make recommendations, right?
Well, and I think that was what they attempted to do. I mean, there was almost a voice in the paper that went back and forth between the different agencies that were writing it. I think it's an interesting, awkward, like I said, inconclusive. They don't have any strong recommendations. The whole notion that FTC or DOJ can opine on state regulation, that's been the case for forever. They have a long history, particularly FTC, of being asked to weigh in on issues that are either being proposed or being considered, and so that's not really new. When you kind of balance that out, with the deference that the 21st Amendment and state alcohol regulation should receive, I think it tells a different story. I mean, you can look at a map of the United States, and you can look at where there are more beer distributors. You can look at, and it's interesting because even the report itself, instead of talking about the term, instead of saying, there are fewer distributors or the marketplace is more concentrated, they said that the industry is less, in franchise states, is less fragmented. Well, fragmented is not necessarily a good word because I think they're torn. Which one is better? More choices, more ways to get to market, less concentrated business, or is it indeed, does that aid competition? And I think it does. I mean, we're reminded of what the Department of Justice said when it, in 2016, was reviewing the merger between Anheuser-Busch InBev and its acquisition of SAB Miller. And I'm paraphrasing, but they basically said independent distribution is essential to competition. This did not repudiate that. It did not refute that. It is a newer review that, like we said, is it's inaccurate, it's incomplete, and it's inconclusive.
Well, and like I think you just kind of referenced it, that those of us who are a little bit older remember the FTC has been talking about this for 20 years, if more. And let's also remember that the FTC fought exclusive territories for many, many years, saying that it was anti-competitive, when now I think it's accepted economic, theory that it's actually it entices more competition and probably brings prices down to an orderly market.
I think that's exactly right. And I think that's especially important for everyone that is newer to the beer industry. And I say this for suppliers and retailers and distributors, understanding the value of exclusive territories, that works for everybody. That goes to a brand owner being able to ensure that the equities of their brands are protected in the marketplace. It goes to the ability to setting pricing independently. It goes to a whole host of things that actually, are helpful to the economy. And to your point, oftentimes can aid competition.
Right. Well, let's talk about Pepsi getting licensed and getting into the distribution system. How do you view it? And have they become members of the NBWA?
It's interesting that we have had some conversations with Pepsi. I like those folks very much personally. We've been very candid. And this is certainly a different way to go to market. I think they know that. They did inquire about membership early, and I asked the question, now, wait a minute, are you a brewer? Are you seeking an associate member as a supplier? Well, actually, no, Boston Beer is doing that. Oh, okay. So then, well, we're a distributor, but you're a company-owned distributor. And I said, for instance, Molson Coors and Anheuser-Busch both own distribution in some marketplaces, but we don't have a membership category for them. You have to be an independent beer distributor in order to participate. So it was a good kind of instructive conversation about the way that we roll. But nonetheless, I think they know that what they're doing is different. I think I'm not sure whether they've thought about all the many and varied issues that get set in motion from this. I made mention that for brewers specifically, there's not a requirement that they have a federal basic permit, which can create problems as it relates to enforcing trade practice laws, for instance. The conversation with Pepsi, I think, has been an ongoing educational effort because, we had a big conversation kind of early on about the limitation in paying slotting fees or giving an item of value to a retailer. And the response was, yes, we know that there are a number of state laws that prohibit this. And I said, no.
Yeah.
There's a federal prohibition. There is a law that is called the Federal Alcohol Administration Act that restricts you from doing this. Oh, so interestingly, they've made some changes to their proposal.
Right.
I know that a number of states are looking at this. I know that this could create a lot of challenge for them. It likewise could create a lot of challenge depending on what they want to do with the line extensions of a globally recognized soft drink brand. I mean, that is different than Pabst having a contractual relationship to make Not Your Father's Root Beer once upon a time, and the launch of a globally recognized hard Mountain Dew. So we'll see. It's going to be very interesting.
Right. And what do you think about these soda brands that are, like you say, nationally recognized soft drink brands, line extending into alcohol? Are we pushing the envelope? Are we going to end up in a Four Loko situation like we did with state AGs getting involved?
Well, I think it depends because ingredients matter. Alcohol origin matters. We'll talk about that a little bit later. But it depends. I mean, some of these, Simply does not have as much brand awareness as Mountain Dew. No way, no how. It's not there've not been ads during the Olympics. Maybe there are, but that would be very new. Some of these, Topo Chico was not an alcohol brand, but not something that was part of a youth or an extreme sports marketing campaign. It was something that we enjoyed, in Texas and Oklahoma, on a hot summer day as kind of a novelty. So those are different kind of dynamics than going with a globally recognized brand.
Well, let's pivot to spirit-based canned cocktails. Those are, blurring of the lines. Obviously, they're taxed at a much higher rate in most states, and they're not available in many states everywhere. And the discus guys have made, they've made it clear that they're at the state level, especially gonna kind of, try to get more equivalency going there. They've had a little bit of success, I guess, like in Michigan and maybe Nebraska or somewhere, but notably in New Jersey, that bill got failed to pass. So where do we go from there? And is it an existential crisis like Jim Cook indicates?
Oh, I think for beer and I think for Jim, absolutely. I think that there is a concern here as we look at the very clear intentions of discus. We look at their words. We look at the fact that they are almost baiting the beer industry, and I use that word very deliberately as it relates to seeking a lower excise tax rate for these products, and adding to the conversation a equivalency argument. And of course, the origin of the alcohol matters. It always has. Since colonial days, beer, wine, and spirits have been taxed at different rates. It goes to the alcohol concentration, and it goes to how the products are consumed. And so if I've got a product and it says Budweiser on the side of it, everybody knows what that is. It is a beer. If I have a product in the same container and it says Jim Beam on the side of it, everybody knows what it is. It's a whiskey. It's a bourbon product. It's brown liquor. And so it is really rich. It's really interesting to put this forward by, you said, is this an existential threat? I think it's the spirits folks that are seeking to make it that. And again, they're baiting beer, obviously at the state level, but they're also doing it at the federal level, making noise, talking about, these issues. And it's especially important when we know that the spirits industry specifically takes advantage of a whole host of tax loopholes. There's a 50-10 flavoring credit that allows them a reduced rate for products that are made with alcohol flavoring. There is a rum cover over, which is a piece of economic development that basically pays a subsidy to the manufacturers to make distilled spirits in the Virgin Islands and in Puerto Rico. And then, of course, the duty drawback issue, I think, is getting a lot of attention as it relates to the whole notion of alcohol manufacturers being able to import and export tax products at a tax rate of 0. So all of these issues, I think, as we talk about some of the ambitions of the liquor segment, all get a workout when you come to the party and you want to talk about reducing your taxes. Let's not forget that the entire alcohol industry got a once in a career, a once in a lifetime tax decrease with the passage of CBMTRA. And just when that happened the first time in 2017, and then when it was made permanent in 2019, Congress recognizes there was a difference. And obviously those differences were affected by these loopholes, but nonetheless, a real difference in the way that beer, wine, and spirits are taxed.
Right. Right. And it's, I think going forward, explaining the difference in the historical significance, and it's just, beer and malt-based beverages take so much longer to make, and they have a shelf life, and there's so much more that goes into it that,
but don't get me wrong, Harry, I'm not down talking canned cocktails. I think canned cocktails have a role. I think that, for beer distributors, if they can get them, they want them on their truck.
sure.
It provides the consumer with an alternative. It gives them something that's portable, something that's ready to drink, literally. My quarrel is not at all with the product. It's just the whole notion of the liquor industry's ambitions. I think we need to be very careful of. You may just talk yourself into a real challenge.
Yeah. Interesting. Pack a big lunch, as you say. Pack a big lunch.
Absolutely.
Well, how do you, Craig, how do you balance a lot of consolidation going on in the beer industry? Your members are becoming fewer and larger. So how do you balance the wants and needs of your larger acquiring wholesalers, which that are getting larger, with the majority of your smaller members that maybe have different priorities?
Yeah, I think you've got to be very deliberate, and you've got to listen to where folks are, because my experience has been that regardless of size, the members' interest in maintaining the regulatory and legal system has been something that's been universal. We have not seen beer distributors. It doesn't mean that in a state there's not a one-off from time to time, a disagreement in the locker room, if you would. But we have remained strong because our industry is held together. And I think that's because of parties or owners and operators, regardless of size, realizing and recognizing that they need each other. And that if they start fighting in the locker room, they put the whole thing at risk. And, quite frankly, that's one of the things I'm the most proud of. It has been that by and large, we've been able to stick together. We've been able to air our differences. We talk about it under the umbrella of the state association. Certainly when folks come to Washington in April for the legislative conference, and we haven't done that for the last 2 years, I'm looking forward to that distributor members meeting where we shut the door and we say, hey, what's on your mind? Here's what we think you need to be aware of and need to be thinking about. But we also want to hear from you. And so that kind of commonality and that kind of unity of purpose, I think, has served us well. And it's way up there as it relates to an objective for our organization going forward.
Right. Okay, cool. And we were just talking about that yesterday. I think I will be there in Washington this year for the Ledge Conference.
Right.
It's the same week as my son's bachelor party, but that doesn't start till like Thursday. So I'll go straight from Washington to Vegas. Should be a good time.
I will not be surprised if you can't walk and chew gum. You can handle that.
I can do both. Jordan, I didn't mean to hog the mic as usual.
You're on mute.
Yeah, I know.
Well, I mute myself just so Harry can get in there. But no, going back, I know you want to talk about the Ledge Conference, but jumping back to the equivalency argument, I think tax is one issue, but then there's access, and that's a whole another issue. And then, in talking with distributors, do you sense that they're a little more conflicted on that front?
Hey, let's call a spade a shovel. I mean, Anheuser-Busch bought a Cutwater out at the Super Bowl. This is happening. I mean, that's why I made sure that when I talked about taxes, particularly at the federal level, I want to say I think there's a place for these products, and I think that we've got to work extra hard to try to be consistent. My position is that recognizing there's a difference in taxation on these products, and I also should mention, lots of states have existing laws on these issues. Some states have a different tax treatment for lower alcohol products, and you've got to respect that. If that's been part of your code for years, you need to understand what does it look like to deviate from that, particularly if these are lower alcohol products. So there's some work here, Jordan, no doubt about it. I mean, we have to, and it's like so many of the things that we do, it's not always a one size fits all solution. We got to listen to the other person. We've got to try to make room for what makes the most sense. But it's there is a, I don't know. I haven't decided what the best word is. Is it an evolution? Is it a migration? Is it a convergence? I don't know. But what I know is, more people than ever want on the beer wholesaler's truck.
Right.
The one thing that our group has demonstrated over the last 2 years is they get it done. They get through when others don't. They are the ones that are continuing to make it happen. And whether it's innovative new products like canned cocktails, or whether it's an expansion of non-alcohol products, which we're also, watching fill up our trucks and warehouses like never before. One of the things we did in the fall was announce the kind of the change to our tagline from America's beer distributors to America's beer and beverage distributors. That was super deliberate, and that is exactly what's happening. So, but make no mistake about it, man. This is why they call it work.
Well, I mean, is it work? We're still having a little bit of fun out here.
I'm with you. It's like some days you're like, man, this is really hard. This absolutely sucks. And then there are some days where you're like, I am the luckiest. It's Lou Gehrig, man. Anyway.
All right. Well, Craig, thank you so much for being on, bud. It's good to see you again. You're looking well. And yes, and the Ledge Conference. What are the dates on that?
So April 3 through 6 in DC. Let me walk you through the schedule because it's important to note. Kind of Sunday night is our early arrivals, and we'll have a small welcome reception. Monday morning, we get started with some value-added seminars. We're going to talk about a whole host of issues. We're planning on having a trade practice seminar from the folks from TTB. That's very top of mind. If you've had the unpleasantry of any kind of an enforcement action or investigation, knowing what the rules are, we think is real important.
Especially since they're starting to really enforce it, and those fines are getting material.
Absolutely. And it's one of those things where, as frustrating as it is and as unpleasant as it is, and sometimes TTB can be out of line, and it's very difficult. But understand the rules have never been more important, and those rules, I think, have never been more important as we watch all these new entrants to the industry. We'll also have some an update around and some training around our Beer First activities, which is part of our category growth initiative. It's been an amazing thing to watch how much just organic support there is from distributors, and everything from using the sales sheets and sales tools that have been developed to hosting Beer First Fridays. I'm one of those that believes we actually can return the industry to growth. I think the whole notion that regular beer is done has been greatly exaggerated. I know that there's all kinds of other products out there, and that's great too, but I think we must continue to tend to the fires of regular beer. And then starting at lunch on Monday, we'll have our distributor members meeting, and then that afternoon, we'll be inviting our partners and associate members and brewers to join us for an industry session. We'll hear from Charlie Cook, who's a great pundit who will try to make sense of the nonsense political environment that we're dealing with. We will have a reception on Monday night that's hosted by the Beer Institute. We're thrilled that those members will be coming together. We'll be at Charlie Palmer's once again for good fellowship and time together with industry leaders. And then on Tuesday morning, we will go and hit the Hill. And it'll feel a little bit different. We think a number of our meetings will be held in the Capitol complex and members' offices. We've got space reserved all over Capitol Hill for cups of coffee and beer for folks that where it's easier to meet with their member in an office at the Capitol Hill Club at another venue. So we're really excited about that. And then on Tuesday night, our Cheers event will be back. We're looking forward to making up for some lost time as it relates to that event. We're going to be talking, obviously, about competition. We're going to be talking about differentiation. I was thrilled to see Michelle DeCaris kind of talk about that and the fact that alcohol origin matters. I thought that was excellent. And obviously, we're also going to be talking about things like workforce. Very, very top of mind, letting members of Congress know the challenges ranging from, just retaining and recruiting and retaining employees and CDL drivers all the way to the many other varied issues. One piece of news that is breaking as of late yesterday, DC has announced that as of March 1st, they will be rescinding their max and vax order. So this will make for a much more pleasant time at the Legislative Conference. We're looking forward to taking those masks down safely, being able to come together and have some fellowship like we haven't had for 2 years.
Great. Well, it sounds like fun. And what's that Irish pub on the corner there?
Oh shit, you just stumped the freaking band here. Why can't I think of
Oh, the Irish Times is the shitty one.
the Dubliner?
The Dubliner. I love that there's two Irish pubs right next to each other in the middle of downtown or whatever you call that part of DC. And one of them's a super shitty and one of them's really good. And they both stay in business somehow.
They continue to crush it. They made it through the pandemic. I mean, it's just like every other community out there. I mean, these on-premises have just been devastated. And DC was way more shut down than a lot of towns. I mean, we're out in Virginia, and we had a very different COVID than just across the river. I think for those distributors that, have territories where there's one that's urban and one suburban, they were very, very grateful to have that diversity. The Dubliner is king, and we're looking forward to seeing a lot of our old friends and getting together. And when you think about it, we have folks that were elected in 2020 that have never had an in-person meeting with a beer wholesaler. I mean, that's, didn't have one in 20, didn't have one in 21. So that makes 22 way.
Right. All right. Well, listen, thanks for drinking beer, Craig. Thanks for being on. And we'll check in with you after the big show.
All right, fellas. Good to see you. Cheers.
See you,
All
Greg.
right. See you.